This next session is going to focus on resiliency. The last will be on neuroscience, kind of how the brain works. And so we're kind of bringing us down to the final stretch of the meeting, focusing on really two core threads that we have hit on throughout this meeting. One is resiliency, that ability to live and live well each day and each minute of the day through all of the challenges that exist. And in this room, perhaps the major challenge that someone can face in their life, and how to do that, and how to remain hopeful and healthy and happy throughout that. And then our second talk is going to focus on decision making. And we've talked about a lot of decisions. You've brought your burning questions, and we'll hear from a neuroscientist on how does the brain make decisions? How do you make decisions in good times and in bad? But for this first session, we are joined, and I'm honored to say we're joined by really an expert in resiliency, Janet Fanaki. It's my pleasure to introduce her. She is I would say, world expert and leader in what it means to be resilient. Her husband, Adam, was diagnosed with a glioblastoma in 2016. Shortly after, she began blogging and podcasting about her experience and her family's experience, and this has evolved into the podcast Resilient People, which I would encourage you to Google search and take a listen to. She's continued her efforts throughout his treatments and after his passing, and to this day. Janet interviews regular people going through extraordinary situations from all over the world who have lived through one of life's major challenges, found a purpose from it, and now helps others to be resilient too. And she's bringing that expertise, her story, but also how she thinks about resiliency and how others that she's interviewed approach this topic with us today. So Janet, we welcome you to the stage to share examples from your podcast, the common traits of resilient people, and a positive mindset. She's going to guide us through some slides. It will be conversational. I'll join her here and pause her throughout kindly to hit on some of the threads that she introduces. So Janet, let's sit.
Great. Is the mic working? Oh, I can hear myself. Okay. Thank you, Roy, for that very nice introduction. And it's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. Let me start by saying that even though it's been 8 years since Adam was diagnosed with GBM, and it was right around this time, actually, it was September 1st of 2016, that our lives had changed. We were both 47 years old at the time. And what I can tell you is, being at this conference, I feel like I'm in your shoes all over again. And my life has changed significantly since that day. I became a caregiver at that time, but then I also became a caregiver 2 more times afterwards, for my dad and then for my mom, who had both also passed in that time. So I know what you're going through. I appreciate it, and I have empathy for what you're facing. But today I'd like to talk to you about building resilience, and something that I had to really hone in on for the sake of myself and my mental health, for the sake of my children, for the sake of my family. And I felt that, if I was feeling strong enough, for the sake of the entire community, to give people that hope that even if you can find a sliver of a moment each day to find some joy and through maybe some purpose, then that will help build your resilience. So I hope that you take away some value from this presentation. Am I in control?
Got it.
Okay, so what am I pressing?
The green button.
Okay. So what is my story? So as I said, back on September 1st, 2016, everything changed. But let me just backtrack a little bit for you. That summer, we were having a great summer. We had traveled to Florida. We were doing all kinds of activities with the kids. One was entering high school. The other one was just about to finish high school. So one was starting grade 9. The other one was entering grade 12 and about to start university applications. We are from Toronto, by the way. And Adam, over the course of the summer, had started showing some unusual symptoms. He had difficulty hearing us when he would be in very close proximity to, I'm going to say one example was we were in the kitchen, which is quite small at our house, and he would be right behind me and I'd be telling him something, and for a short period of time before that he had no difficulty hearing me whatsoever, and then I would have to repeat myself a couple of times. And I remember turning to him at one point and saying, "What's the matter with you? Why can't you hear me?" And he said, "I don't know, I just can't hear you." And then another example of something that was different was Adam was a very successful competition, which you know down here in the States is antitrust lawyer. Very, very busy guy. Worked a lot. I would say usually 7 days a week, without a joke. And I'm not sure if many of you are familiar with the Canadian band, the Tragically Hip, but they are very dear to Canadians' hearts. And the lead singer over that summer was diagnosed with GBM. And this was something that Canadians got to know very quickly. What's glioblastoma? I've never heard this thing before. It's such a mouthful to say. And, but you know, Gord Downey was his name. And his doctor, Dr. James Perry, would be on the news explaining what GBM was all about, what the prognosis was. But here's this guy and his bandmates that are planning a cross-Canada tour to go to all these major centers and perform for their fans one last time. And I'm thinking to myself, what the heck is this guy all about? He's got this terminal illness and he's planning a tour across the country? This is really crazy. So for those lucky people, they got to see them in person in Kingston, Ontario, a small town that's about 3 hours away from Toronto. But then a lot of us were watching from cottages on TV. We were in movie theaters watching on the big screen. This is what a big deal this last show that they were doing in August was going to be. So maybe some of you had actually experienced that. My friends and I had decided we were going to have dinner in this one area of the city and then hit the movie theater and watch their concert on the screen. And I'd said to Adam, "Hey, Mike and Kathy had said that, you know, we're going to go do this and watch the hip. What do you think? Come on, let's go." And he'd say, "I'm working, and you know what? I'm reading this paper over and over again, and it's not sinking in. I'm just not getting, I'm just not remembering." And I said, "Oh, man, you're exhausted. That's it. You're working too much." So I went with Mike and Kathy, watching Gord Downey, you know, be this superhuman person. And the concert was amazing. And I went home. Adam was exhausted. 2 weeks later, he was diagnosed with glioblastoma. We were on our way to the US Open the next day. We were going to be in a friend's box. It was like a dream come true. I love watching tennis. The US Open is happening now. Show of hands who's been watching, by the way.
Tennis fans, yes.
Yeah, I mean, come on, right? It's been amazing. So, yeah, he advocated for himself, thank God, to get scans. And the CT showed something, and then an MRI followed. He called me to say, "Please bring an overnight bag for me. And by the way, do you want to know now, or would you rather wait till you come down to the hospital to hear what they told me?" And I thought, you're by yourself hearing this news. I'm not going to let you sit there for a minute longer without telling somebody else. And so I said, "No, I'm pulling the car over, tell me now." And then he told me it was a terminal brain tumor and he has 15 months to live. This is everything that they told him while he was sitting on the bed in the hospital room. So there I am driving down to the hospital, and the first person I called was my mom. And I started thinking immediately to myself, how am I going to help him? How am I going to be there for my kids? But I called my mom because I needed to tell somebody. He had told me to not share it with anyone, but of course I was going to tell my mom. So my mom's first reaction and question to me was, "What do I tell people?" And I immediately said to her, "Well, I'm going to build my circle of support And my advice to you, Mom, is that you build your own circle of support, because I can't be that person to you for everything. I can't be that person for everybody. I can be there for the kids, I can be there for Adam, I can be there for myself, but you need to have your friends know what you're going through. And so that was the start of the journey. It was...
So Janet, I gotta pause you there.
Yeah.
You are an incredibly inspiring person. Thank you for sharing this part of this story. I can see so many faces here sort of nodding about the trauma that you just described and faced, that you went through, and so many complex things going on. You're processing this news that your husband received, and you're living with that challenge that he's facing, and also you yourself are processing that as well. It will impact you and your kids and your relationships with them. And all the while I'm thinking about, you're driving the car, like, stay off the road.
Mm-hmm.
How are you calling your mom? But a part that you brought up that I don't know if we've really explored is, it sounds like you were even thinking back to those couple of weeks before the diagnosis. And, should I have known this, or should I have recognized this? Should I have gone to that concert and those things? Mm. Can you talk about, was that in your mind, or how did you think through that? There's a little bit of that guilt that comes in as a caregiver or as a patient that we all face of what were we thinking there? Was that in your mind? Can you tell us more about that?
I don't think that the guilt had set in at that point. I think I was just more in solutions mode at that point. It was just, seeing him in the hospital room even, and, the first thing he thought was, how did this happen? Why me? And my immediate thing to him was, and again, I just thought, don't make this about you, make this about him. And I said, you know what, we're gonna build the best team that we can around us to help us through this and figure this out. The guilt kind of came a little bit, I would say, when you would be doing things for yourself. But I felt very strongly that even if it was just 5 or 10 minutes a day that I was taking time out for myself, that was important. I'll get into some of the people that I felt were helped build my resilience. I'm a pretty strong person, but listen, glioblastoma will knock anybody down to their knees. So even if you are a strong person, but there wasn't too much guilt.
Well, I like this first take home of who is that team you're building around you from the very beginning, and who is each person, Mom, Adam, building around to help to support them through what will clearly be, a journey as you went forward.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say Adam had his colleagues at work. He was, thank goodness, very beloved in his profession and in his friend circle. So he was lucky to have that. For my mom, she was remarkable. She had friends from the time that she was a little kid living in Toronto. So she had that circle of friends, from Dewson Street that she grew up on, and then she had her high school friends, and then she had her work friends. She had different people to pull from. We're a pretty close family, but the other part of that too is that the self-awareness that you can only go back to those same people over and over again so often. The reality that I was very aware of is that we're all adults at this point in our lives. Everybody has big demands on their lives. So when someone is offering to help, you grab that opportunity, because it's important to give yourself a little bit of reprieve, but then at the same time to source out where else you can get that reprieve. Is it through a psychologist? Is it through online help? Is it through just taking a walk around the block? Yeah.
Well, I know you have demonstrated resilience all along this journey. What is resilience to you? Can you give us a better understanding as you think about it? What is resilience?
So I would say, the definition is the ability to recover, bounce back from misfortune or change. This is what we typically hear. But then, there are all kinds of other words that are used to define resilience. I'd love to hear from the audience. When resilience comes to your mind, what pops up? Strength? You can shout it out. I don't need hands. Stubbornness, okay.
Flexibility.
Yeah.
Gratitude.
Yeah.
Being able to push through the struggles.
So we hear resilience a lot. We hear, the term, be resilient, be strong. Well, how do you do that? People don't talk about that enough. So I started thinking about, we were spending hours, days, weeks, months, 3.5 years going for treatments to the Sunnybrook Odette Cancer Center in Toronto. I have a PR background, public relations, and I stopped working for the sake of just being there for Adam and my kids. And I started looking around and thinking to myself, if we weren't in a cancer center, all these people are kind of just going about normal stuff that they would do in their lives. So they're playing games, they're doing Wordle, they're chit-chatting, they're snacking, they're gossiping, they're hugging, it was amazing to me to look around and feel like this is kind of normal life. What's going on here? How is it these people that are all dealing with cancer can still manage to look like life is moving forward? So then I started thinking in my own mind about the people that I felt were really resilient in my personal life. There were a couple that came to mind. And I thought, I need something to do, man. Like, I can't just focus on GBM all the time and helping people. Adam was into these turmeric drinks and specific foods. My whole life had done a 180. And I thought, I need to claim some of this back of like something that I can help move me forward. So then I thought, what's resilience? Let's talk to some people. And then I started a blog and I posted it on a website that I called Resilient People. And then I took to social media and people were responding back to me saying, hey, my husband is a really resilient person. You should talk to him. Oh, my wife, my neighbor, my whatever. Okay, yeah, bring it on. I want to hear these people's stories. I needed to build that positive community around me. So this is how Resilient People came about. And I can tell you that some of these people have become dear friends of mine. We check in with each other regularly. These are all strangers to me from back in the beginning of my journey. And now they've become a part of my purpose, my circle of support. And their stories are all different. It's not just brain tumor stories. I've got examples of a Holocaust survivor. I have a mom whose son was murdered by his best friend. I have a woman who's a financial expert who was at one point in her life broke. I have a caregiving expert. I have a PhD candidate, well now she's actually a doctor, but when she was defending her PhD dissertation, she wore a skirt made out of rejection letters. And she thought, this is the message, and her PhD had nothing to do with that, but she felt that it was important to deliver the message that rejection and failure is a normal part of life. Everyone goes through it, and we need to normalize these things. And so talking to these people and hearing their stories and sharing them with others, I thought, yeah, I'm building my own circle of support, but then maybe I'm inspiring some other people to do the same, to maybe get out of their headspace of what's wrong in their life and maybe turn that around to do something good out of it.
Yeah, sort of find the strength within when faced in this challenging situation. And I'm thinking back to your story, as you're in this car and hearing this news, it's driving the strength within you. Say, I can get through this, and I'm going to use that strength to do so. And you're seeing that in all of these people.
Yep.
Different stories and different challenges that require that they call on that sort of inner strength and use that to find resilience.
Exactly.
I see that in this room. We've heard that the last 2 days of how resilient each and every one of the people here, starting as strangers and then building community, but seeing similar strength, I think, in the room and in stories that have been shared. I think we've heard that a lot.
One other, positive thing that came out of doing the podcast is that it taught me how to be a podcaster, which clearly I had no clue how to do any of that. But, COVID had given me an opportunity to do that, and I'm grateful for it. So we can run this video. I was just going to share a few clips from a few of my guests.
I was beginning to understand that I did need some kind of reprieve. But where does one find that if you cannot leave home and you're constantly waiting for the next crisis? So one of the things that I found was my garden. I had never had a garden, or I didn't know anything about planting plants or flowers outside. And I said, I'm just going to plant flowers and we're going to have an English garden, which was a very ridiculously grand thought and probably not very realistic, given that I had never planted a single thing in my life before. But I thought, well, I can't leave home anyway, and I'm constantly on alert, but I could be in my garden, just in my home, extension of my home, and be on high alert, but still do gardening. So I did, and the things that died, that didn't have enough sun or the right pH or whatever, I just ripped them out and put something else in. And I kept expanding the garden. And I found there a sense of what some people might call flow or meditation and peace in my heart, because I was concentrating on helping something grow that was beautiful as my son was dying.
People were just making fun of my diabetes, basically. I decided that I wasn't going to deal with that ignorance anymore, and that I was going to become that voice of, this is what type 1 diabetes is, this is how I deal with it, this is what people go through with type 1 diabetes, and this is why I had to skip that rehearsal. And this is why I have to sit out, and this is why I have to do the things that I do. And it was also because when I was diagnosed at 10 years old, there weren't any girls my age on Instagram or like in my close personal life with type 1 diabetes. So I wanted to be, one, the stereotype buster, the myth buster.
I like that.
And two, I wanted to be a role model for kids that needed one.
Yeah, midlife is hard. It's hard.
Yeah. And I remember thinking, I'm so busy. This was before I had kids, right? And then I didn't actually understand the concept of busy, I don't think, because sometimes what we have to pull off in a day just because of circumstances or, ever shifting rules of that we're navigating on a day-to-day basis. I mean, like the mental capacity, I think the good thing is that we have learned so many strategies. We have figured out like, what do we do? So for me, it's always, reach out for some support from somebody on the side so I can sort of get all the big emotions out and then say, okay, now let's cut to the chase. What is the solution, or what's the path forward here, and how do I start inching in that direction?
Why would I torture myself for a week leading up to a scan? Why would I ruin 7 days that I could have fun, that we could be laughing, that we could be enjoying each other's company, doing something, over something that reaction is not going to change the results. The results are going to be what they're going to be. So am I going to ruin 7 days and be miserable and not sleep and be stressed? Or am I going to try to make memories?
No matter what you have to deal with, love it, grow from it. And I love this one line in this movie where it said, don't ask why this happened to me. Ask what it can do to help you.
So you can see why I love talking to these people, right? I mean, they're inspiring, they've got this growth mindset, they have perspective on what they've been through. And to me, it just helped empower me. And it just reaffirmed for me the importance of who you have around you is such a big part of building resilience. I can tell you that there were times that I would take my dog for a walk and I'd run into somebody who I wouldn't see very often. There was one example I can think of in particular where she literally stopped her car. Janet, oh my God, how are you dealing with this? I just can't imagine what that must be like. Oh, if it happened to me, I don't know what I would do. That's it. I'm not talking to you anymore. That, in my mind, it was an easy decision because I knew that I was lucky enough to be having other people around me that if I was crumbling, I'm not going to that person. I'm going to somebody who's going to make me laugh, who's going to understand me, who's going to listen. To me, that just, she was making it more about herself rather than making it what I'm going through. So these are a few of the traits that I've come to learn are very common with my guests, that they're focused on what serves them. They have an interest in helping others, because what I've learned also is that by helping others, you're really helping yourself. You're helping yourself feel better, and that's a good feeling. My guests have gone on to doing fundraisers, they're bloggers, they've gone on to advocacy, podcasting, a slew of different things. These are their purposes that they've found, but let me tell you something. Your daily purpose does not need to be anything that falls into this list. If it means when you're washing your face, you're giving yourself a face massage, that's a nice purpose to have. If it means that you're lying down for 5 or 10 minutes while your person is lying down, it's like the baby analogy. When the baby is lying down, you should lie down. It's not a bad thing. It's serving you, it's making you feel better. There are small ways that you can find a purpose in your daily life while you're still dealing with GBM or any brain tumor diagnosis that you can be helping yourself.
I love the concept of like the 5-minute win. Mm-hmm. What are the 5 minutes in my day and your day and our day that can be a win? Mm-hmm. And we love to celebrate these in clinic. Is what's that 5-minute win you had this past week? And let's celebrate that and live in that moment. And there's so many of those on the left side of that screen there.
Exactly. So as I said earlier in my introduction, Adam was my introduction to being a caregiver. And then shortly after he passed, during his illness actually, my dad had congenital heart failure, and he was put into long-term care. He was in and out of hospital. It was very difficult time. He ended up passing in 2023 in the spring, and I was in and out of long-term care being his primary person. And then once he passed, which was May of 23, I thought, here's my moment to kind of catch up on the things that have been on the back burner. No, my mom in July of 23 was diagnosed with a very aggressive lymphoma, and she actually passed just last month. And there again, it was, the positive was that I had already been a caregiver twice before, so I was, well versed in how to speak in clinic and, be a part of the team. This was another thing that Adam and I were very strong about, is that, whoever we were going to be partnering with as far as our clinicians, we wanted to feel that we weren't just patient, doctor, social worker, whatever. We're all operating with the same end goal to help Adam and hopefully help me a little bit too, even if it was just through therapy sessions and them asking me, hey, how are you doing? So some challenges that caregivers face, or they feel thrown into this role. We've heard this over the last few days. We're ill-prepared to do it well, nowhere to get immediate answers. They feel unheard by their medical team, maxed out. This is just a small sample of all the challenges that caregivers face. But what are some solutions? You're starting out in probably one of the best places by being in this community, not just learning from experts in the field, but being together and feeling like you're not alone. This is such a big part of this journey, this experience that you're on. Building that community, my friend Cheryl is right there. And if it weren't for me expressing to somebody who I barely knew, saying, oh, my husband just passed away from glioblastoma, this person said, oh my God, I have a friend in Montreal, her husband, same, you should be connected. And we did, and it's been a great friendship. So we're traveling and gonna have some fun in Chicago after. Online resources are available everywhere, as we said, abta.org. WeTrials is another group that I've partnered with who are helping to navigate the brain tumor experience for patients and caregivers, as well as finding ways to streamline the process of clinical trials. There are brain tumor support groups everywhere. Please be careful about what you're jumping into, but it is available. And other brain tumor organizations from around the world, like the Brain Tumor Foundation of Canada, for example, which is where I'm from, and I use their resources widely. If you're feeling unheard by your clinicians and your team, don't be afraid to pull them aside. It doesn't need to be in front of your person. It could be just in the hallway. I had done that once with my mom's doctor, just to say, you know what, I'm drowning here. I feel like, I'm not even getting asked anything. She's getting all the questions and she's overwhelmed with things. Like, please direct some of it to me, just to feel that you're being empowered in the process. And seeking professional therapy, I can't understate that enough. The importance of, BetterHelp is out there online. If you're not able to find somebody in person that you can speak with, it's really important and it's so valuable. And I know some people might say, oh, I tried, it didn't work. I get that, but it's like buying jeans or a swimsuit. You gotta go back and try different people and see what fits for your personality, for what your challenges are. I'm going to skip this. So, and my purpose has become advocacy work. It's become my podcast. The children and I, we're doing our best to thrive in this next chapter. It was a terrible time for us, but the way that I look at it is, if you're lucky, the story of your life will be long. The book will be big. And, that would be the goal. But, some people have short books, some people have longer books. Adam's story for us, it was a chapter in our lives. And we're trying to write the next chapter in a more positive way, and that's how we're trying to look at it. So in closing, here are some of the takeaways that work for me. The way I bookend my day. So bookending being, when I wake up in the morning, I used to love turning on the news. I hate watching the news now. But it's a necessity, right? We need to know what the weather is. We need to know what the top stories are. But I do a deliberate choice in not watching that first in the morning. I'll watch something else, a YouTube video. I turn on TMZ, I turn on Food Network, something that is mindless, and I end my day the same way. Maybe with a book, it's just something that's unrelated to something that's negative. Because I feel like if you start and end your day that way, for me anyway, it wasn't healthy. I try to be as transparent as possible, and I'm gonna tell you a quick story. I had a neighbor who lived across the road from me. She was in her 90s. Her name was Kay. And early in the process, in 2016, she saw me sweeping my driveway. And I would do this just to kind of get myself out of the house doing something. And she summoned me over. She was in like her long, pajama gown, right? And so I got over, and I just thought to myself, I don't want to talk to Kay right now, I know. Anyway, I went over. And she said, Janet, how are you? And I said, oh, I'm okay. And then she goes, I know you're not okay. I heard what's going on. You can't be okay. You tell people you're effing, and I'm telling you, she didn't say effing, you are effing not okay. You start telling people that. Stop trying to protect other people. Be honest. And from that moment on, I did. And you know what? There was a levity that came to me from doing that, from not hiding what I was going through. I didn't know who I was trying to protect, but for some reason, our impulse is to say, I'm okay, but just be honest.
We all need a Kay.
We all
out
need
there in her pajamas, beginning of the day in the driveway. Of course she doesn't give a, Absolutely.
So I'll skip over this. Whatever your purpose is in every day, I'll just circle back to this. If it's Wordle, we have a family Wordle group that we all participate in. If it's dancing in your basement to 80s music for a couple minutes a day, if it's checking in on a neighbor, if it's singing, if it's working out, whatever it is, if it takes just a few minutes, if it takes half an hour, whatever, please ensure that you're doing something for yourself every day. This is how we can stay in touch. If you'd like to check out the podcast or you'd like to email me, everything is on the website. So please don't hesitate. I would love to hear from you. And I'd like to thank the ABTA for having me. Thank you, Roy. And I'm ready for questions if there's time.
So we do have time for questions, and we'll open it up to the audience, both here in person and virtually. And while we do, I just want to echo back a few things, Janet, that I just learned from you. One takeaway that I will take forward is just, it sounds like the motto is, if life is a book, find the purpose on every page.
I like that.
And I heard that in multiple parts of your story is what from today can I find purpose and meaning and value in? And it may be the gardening. I love the gardening story. It may be Kay and the conversation on the driveway. It may be that sweeping, the driveway for 5 minutes. But where can I in each day, find purpose? I think that's a great takeaway kind of woven into what you described. So thank you for that.
Good.
Questions?
Or comments.
Or comments. Thoughts and
I
ideas?
covered it all? Sorry?
Everyone's tired.
I'm sure. When they told me that I'm one of the closing presenters, I thought, oh boy. Yes.
How did you find all the subjects for your podcasts?
Social media and
so
people.
The question, just for those joining virtually, is how, when you talk about your podcast, how do you identify these resilient people before knowing they're resilient? How do you find them?
Yeah, they always submit a little blurb about what their story is, and then I do a deeper dive on them online just to find out a little bit more about them. Just because I have gotten a lot of people. It hasn't been difficult, let me just say, and people wanting to share. The key for me was that they needed to be just regular, everyday people that we could all identify with. I mean, I'm not in a position to be tapping into celebrities and people of high profile, but it's those regular people that I can relate to their stories. I can put myself in their shoes and think, yeah, okay, yeah, I identify with what you're talking about here. I may not identify with you scaling the 7 summits of the world or, rowing a boat, from England to Spain or, these other sorts of things. I can respect that, but I can appreciate the challenge that you were going through. And so I've been very fortunate in how people have come to me.
So 2 questions from the virtual audience. One, staying close to positive people was also something you mentioned several times. How can you tell who's bringing positivity? What are those things that you've learned about identifying who's that person in the car who's going to sort of get you into that negative headspace? Mm-hmm. Who are those people who really elevate your positivity, your optimism? And how have you learned of strategies to bring that more forward in your interactions and those things with people?
So I'm not a fan of toxic positivity. I know those people as well, the ones who are got the pom-poms out all the time and you're doing no wrong and da-da-da-da. I mean, some people in my closest circles, they can be that way. But I can say that, let's say, for example, if I was feeling low, there's one friend in particular that I have who, man, she's so funny. She's just funny. And she's the one I go to. She's also an empath. So she's got the perfect balance. And we've known each other since we were kids. So I'm lucky to have her in my social circle. There have also been those people who They do kindness and positivity in ways of dropping something off for me to eat, in times when they knew that I was really struggling. But they weren't the person that they were good in listening or reaching out. That was their method of reaching out. Maybe a bouquet of flowers. Maybe it was just, oh, hey, I was passing by getting a lasagna for myself. I dropped one off for you. But I know that they weren't the person that I was going to go to kind of cry, because they weren't going to give me what I needed. So I had to be able to identify the few people. I'm not talking like I have 20 people that I go to for this kind of stuff. There are a handful. And so you have to be keenly aware of who those people are that are going to give you the support and the ones that aren't. But sometimes, people will say, oh, they just weren't there for me, but maybe they needed to do it in a different kind of way.
I love that. It's back to that building of the team, and going to those people at the moments when you need them, and sort of knowing who's on my team and who can help me with the place that I am. One other question online, I think, is what are the three of the biggest challenges that you feel like you've faced as you've walked through this journey? Maybe one, maybe two, maybe three. What are some of the challenges and how you've faced those?
I think, being a mom, figuring out how I'm going to help my kids through this. Because it's one thing to face the fact that your husband may not be around for much longer, but it's another thing to visualize your children not having their dad. And this is something that will never leave me. So it's something that I always struggle with. But, I can't remember the time that I actually told them when he was diagnosed. Maybe that's a blessing, because it probably was a really painful time. I remember thinking, though, that I was driving them around a lot. So those would be the moments that I would often talk to them about what was happening, give them the updates. They were older, right? Like I mentioned earlier, grade 9 and grade 12. So that was something that I thought, because if I was looking them in the face, I just couldn't handle it. So driving became the biggest method for me to share information. And I'm sure I did that even on my hands-free headset when I'd be calling people, because I was in the car so often. So I can't think of 3 examples, but I could think of that.
It's a great example, and find that place and that space that is right for you to process the difficult things. I think that's a great
Because I think the reality too is that even if you are a strong person, you feel you're resilient, all these sorts of buzzwords, the reality is that you're still a human being, and even the strongest of us has challenges, as far as mental health with this. And you just have to find ways to manage that.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, your strategies, what you have learned from so many people about being resilient. Critically important, and we really appreciate your perspective.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Roy. Thanks, Roy. Okay.
All right. One more session. We're almost there. So thank you for sticking with us, for just a wonderful amount of engagement all throughout the program. We are ending in a little bit of a different place than where we began. We have talked a lot about brain tumors, about what happens when the brain is not functioning. And our last talk is about what happens when the brain is working, and is really working to make decisions. All throughout this 2.5 days, you've heard of the many decisions that we all make in the neuro-oncology space. As patients, you're making decisions about treatment and about your life. As caregivers, you're supporting those decisions and guiding decisions that your patient is making. As a care team, we're thinking about presenting information in a way that you can make decisions. So this last